everyone. This is Lori Smith here on Spreaker, and glad to be here. I wanted to do a show tonight. I actually wanted to do a couple of shows. Really, just looking back tonight, and just a big reminder for people: never give up. I was so close to giving up so many times as a child, as a teenager, and a young teen, and then all the way through my 20s and 30s, and into my 40s. And two of my brothers committed suicide, and I know other people who've committed suicide as well, people I work with and stuff, and it's a horrible situation for a lot of people. It's a reality for a lot of people, and it was a reality for me for so many years, and May 22nd, really tomorrow, is a bit of a major anniversary for me. 5 years, May 22nd, 5 years ago, is really my redemption. I just before that, previously to May, like March, April of 2007, I had been continuing to contemplate suicide for many, many years, all the way through my 20s and 30s. And when I was in my late teens and stuff, I kind of was hoping I'd just die of a drug overdose or something like that. I wasn't really thinking about necessarily taking myself out. I used to drive really crazy and wreck my cars and hurt people and hurt myself, but it wasn't so much suicide on my mind. I just wanted out. I just wanted out of my pain. And then I, in my 20s, started to think about suicide and think about what I could do, where I could go. And it was a hard road, because it was always in the back of my mind. I'd go to work, like I was talking here on a show not too long ago here on Spreaker, that I lived kind of like a double life. Like I'd go to work and everything was great, and I could go have fun with people, have a good time, had friends and whatnot, and then I'd come home on the couch and sit on the couch after work and want to end my life. I was so tired. I was just tired of having to keep all this stuff in, because I really hadn't told anyone up into 2007. Prior to 2007, I told some people. I told some good friends of mine, about a little bit about my past and what caused me to be so down, And just in talking with people, certain subjects would come up. People would tell me about maybe they were abused or something, and I'd talk to them a little bit about my story. But I never really went public with it until after May 22nd of 2007. And I really didn't start going public with it until 2009. So a couple years after that. But I had been looking for information and searching out information for my own particular healing journey, to heal from the wounds of child abuse and child sexual abuse, and just growing up in hell, And so many people, sadly enough, so many of us out there, right? And that's why I do what I do. That's why I just continue to keep talking, because it was people like that were out there when I was looking for help, and I was looking for someone that I could relate to, that I knew could relate to me, because I knew that they knew where I had been. I knew that they knew what kind of a lifestyle I had lived, and how hard it is as growing up as a child being abused. How hard it is, and especially when there's no support, period, from family. Really, I mean, there's an abusive family. It's like, where's the support going to be? I mean, come on. Most people, it's kind of a joke, you know what I mean? Like, it's a huge joke to me that people would think that there could ever be any support within an abusive family, right? There's no support, period. And any kind of relationship that we ever had was dysfunctional and toxic, right? So, like, no help from, I couldn't expect any help from my family, right? And that's fine. That's the way it is, right? They were abused too, so what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I can't expect them to be on their healing journey if they're not. And even if they were, we can never really be on it together. We all experienced different things, and we were all treated a little bit differently within the home, because we were all in different places at different times, different years apart. Different things were going on in the home. And so, they could never really relate. I could never really relate with them, right? We were all kind of strangers growing up in this abusive environment. And so, I was just kept all this stuff in, really to myself. Mainly the main abuse stuff. I let a few close friends know, what had happened to me and stuff, and what was going on in my life as a child. It's so many times survivors won't tell anybody, or they don't feel, or maybe they do tell somebody and the person just doesn't receive it well. Maybe they're just, the person that they tell just can't handle that kind of information, or doesn't understand what it would be like to be abused, And so that's why when I started speaking out really publicly, back in 2009, I just wanted to be another voice, really. I just wanted to be one more voice out here for people, because I knew that prior to 2009, like 2007, I was sitting on the couch as a 42-year-old woman, ready to kill myself, right? I wanted to self-injure, I wanted to kill myself. I was just always planning my suicides, especially heavy that year. I was planning, I won't tell you how, but I would had a few ideas, and they would have worked, it would have been final, right? And 2 of my brothers killed themselves, like I said, and suicide just kind of ran in my family. I talk a lot about this, right? And, when you grow up with parents talking about killing themselves, like my dad was always trying to kill himself, trying to run down the freeway and get hit by trucks and cars and stuff, and in the middle of the night, and naked. And my mom was always talking about killing herself, or killing me, or killing somebody, right? My mother was always talking about that. So I just grew up that way. My brothers grew up that way. We all grew up that way. And 2 of my brothers did take their lives. And one hung himself. The other one died of a drug overdose in a shelter. So, not close together in years. Like many years apart. But they both killed themselves. And it was a tough thing, because I sat there and I would think to myself, well, I won't do that. I won't kill myself. I won't be like them. I won't give up. And then part of me, at times, just couldn't handle it. It just couldn't handle it, and I would just drift off and drift into this pit of despair, and it'd be really hard to pull myself out of it. I'd go to work during the day and I'd be fine, and then I'd get home and I'd be like, oh man, I'm stuck with myself. I'm stuck with my past. How am I going to deal with this? I want out of the pain. Mainly, that's what it was, right? This pain in my heart, and this pain in my very soul, And May 22nd, really, that's the day, but March, April of 2007 is really when I made the decision to live, really. I said, I was like, that's it, I will never, because I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, who's going to care, like, who is really going to care if I kill myself, like, nobody. My family wouldn't care. They would just be like, oh, well, there she goes, just like her brothers, killing herself. No big deal. And my brothers, like, ashes weren't even picked up from the morgue, nobody cared about my brothers, right? And nobody would care about me either, and they still don't, right? So I thought, okay, who am I doing this for? Who am I going to rip myself to shreds for? Who am I really going to shred myself for? Because I had a screwdriver in my hand. I was going to rip my arms up and really cause some damage. I wanted to show the world what my parents and what my sibling had done to me, and I wanted to make people aware of the type of pain involved in child abuse and psychological damage, emotional damage, physical damage, child sexual abuse. I wanted people to understand. I thought, who's gonna understand from this? Like, nobody. All I'm gonna do is hurt myself. So I started to think it through rationally, and at the age of 42, finally started to figure it out that, if I hurt myself, no one is gonna care. I could disappear off the planet, and it isn't gonna make one bit of difference, right? The people that I needed to care about me, which was my mother, my dad, my sister, mainly because she was the next oldest to me, she was 5 years older than me, the next in age to me, and we were so far apart from each other, even though we shared a room for like 13 years or whatever. So far apart from each other because of the abuse. She was in denial. She was DID, and I was not, and she was just pretending everything was okay, and I was not. So we couldn't even relate, like, not at all. And the age difference, So but these are the people that needed to care. These are the people that needed to care. I needed protection. I needed help. My mother used me as a punching bag. I was a punching bag for my mother. My mom took all of her aggression and all of her anger out on me mainly, and one of my brothers. And my dad took all of his frustration out on one of my brothers mainly, my other brother, the one that raped me. And so there was 3 of us that really got picked on in the home, and it was my brother, 2 of my brothers, and myself. And the rest just kind of got left alone, right? Like my sister, because she was basically sitting in a corner hiding all the time, like she never got paid attention to. And so she was ignored, right? So she was never in trouble. I was always running around and acting like a normal child, and I guess it was a perfect opportunity for my mother to take it out of me, Um, and it was pretty bleak and pretty grim. I wrote books. I wrote a blog actually, a blog called Not So Fond Memories Growing Up in an Abusive Home. I wrote this blog while my abuser dad, my 90-year-old abuser dad, was staying with me for a year because he didn't have anywhere to stay and he was broke and he needed a place to stay because he's a senior, almost 90. He was like 80 something years old at the time. And he moved up to Canada and he needed someplace to stay until he could get into a senior's lodge or someplace where they could look after him, right? And nobody in my family would take him. Like, my sister wouldn't take him. She was like, no way, I'm not dealing with him because he's crazy. He's absolutely out of his head. And my brother was like, absolutely not. He's not staying with us. He's not staying with us. No way. So I told him, sure. I said, you could stay with me. So after about 6 months, he drove me insane. Like, he couldn't hurt me. Like, what's he going to do? I mean, the only thing I thought he could do is kill me. Because he could. Like, he picked up a knife and held it out at me in the kitchen. Like, he's crazy, right? Mentally ill. And so I was like, man, this is not working. I couldn't believe, like, that I fell for it. You know what I mean? Like, letting my abuser dad stay with me. Like, oh my God. So I started to freak out. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to write a blog because I want people to know. Here I am, 45 years old. 44, just turning 45. I was like, I'm going to write a blog, and that way the world will know what he did to my mother, what he did to my brothers, what my parents did to us. Because I wanted the world to know, It wasn't like it was a secret, My parents were brought up on child abuse charges. They were charged with child abuse against all of us. They were taken to court. They had to go to court because my dad had beaten up my brother, and the school found out. And my brother said he was afraid to go home, feared for his life, and we all did. My dad was crazy, but he was a very hostile, abusive man. And he had been abusing the family for years, way before I was born. Like, I came in, my mom was 38 when I was born. I was born out of marital rape, right? And so, my parents were brought into court, hauled into court, and we were not removed from the home, but they were told to get counseling. They were told that they each needed counseling because they were both screwed up and they were both abused as children themselves, right? They were both mentally ill, diagnosed mentally ill at the time. They didn't remove us from the home because it was the 1960s. Like, no way. Like, it was late 1960s. It was like 67, 68. No way would they remove kids from the home back in those days. They don't even do it today. That's why kids are dying, right? That's why kids are dying. That's why babies are dying, because they're letting insane, psychotic, evil, twisted people kill their children, right? It's really pathetic. But see, I don't blame the system. I blame my parents. I woke up to that, a long time ago. Because when my mom's fist was smashing into my face and causing me to have a bloody nose and fat lip and blood pouring and streaming out of my face, whose fist was in my face? Whose knuckles and whose rings were scratching my face? It was my mother, Like, when she was beating on me with heavy objects like rolling pins and things like that, shoes or whatever she could get her hands on. Table legs, like whatever she could get her hands on. When she was beating me, who was doing that? She was, right? And when she was cursing me and calling me names, I won't even say the names on here. It's just way too vulgar. Cursing me and spitting on me and kicking me. Who was doing that? My mother was, right? I could never really blame the system. I was blaming my mom. I was like, whose fault is this? Whose fault is this that I'm spitting out blood, and that, I'm like coughing blood and shit. Well, that's my mom's fault, right? My mother did that to me. My mother was responsible for most of my abuse. My dad was abusive, he was, if I had anything to do with him, it was generally abusive or weird, because he was a bit of a perv. And so, that the relationship I had with him was horrible too. Whose fault was all that stuff? Well, it was his fault, And when my mom was getting beat up by my dad, whose fault was that? That was my dad's fault. And then people say, well, why didn't your mother leave? Exactly. That's the case. My mom had the opportunity to leave. My mother, she had the opportunity to leave. Even my older siblings told my mother to get out. My older siblings were in their teen years, and they were my brothers when they were still living, and they were trying to protect my mom. That's why they were getting beat up by my dad. We were all trying to protect my mother from my dad, because he was always raping her and hitting her and calling her names. He was a horrible, horrible man. And so, why she didn't leave? She was abused as a child too. Married an abusive man, went from one abusive situation right into another. And she was so beaten down, she didn't know what she was doing, right? She was so screwed. She was diagnosed manic depressive at the time when they were brought into the courts, when they were charged with child abuse charges, right? And so, why she didn't leave, I don't know. Like she said, well, I think it was the fact that she wanted so badly. She wanted to have a decent life, she wanted to have this decent life, but she couldn't, so she let it destroy her. So then she decided, hey, I can't win, so no one's gonna win. Like, I'm getting beat, well, you're all getting beat, I'm getting raped, I don't care if you're getting raped. That was her attitude. It was kind of like, I'm getting screwed, you're getting screwed. Because she lost it. Like, she lost every bit of herself, being married to my dad, right? And there's people today, some of my siblings, who totally honor and respect my dad. And I told them years ago, I'm almost 50 years old. I told them years ago, we used to talk all the time about the abuse and stuff, right? And I told him, I said, what dad did to mom. He raped her. He beat on the kids. He beat on the brothers. He beat on you. He beat on me. She did too. But that he raped her. He treated her like garbage. And they sit there and say, well, yeah, but, oh well. And to this day, they're still kissing his ass. Excuse my language, but they're still kissing his butt, right? This old abuser who walks around acting like a real cute old man because he loves God. He loves God, so he figures everybody, oh, I love God, I love Jesus, praise God, bless you. That's what he does. See, they don't see people that see him today and meet him think he's this nice old man, right? And I'm like, you people don't even know him. You don't even know him, Like, whoa. Well, that's what people thought about my mother too when she was beating the shit out of me. They loved her, right? She would go and cry the blues about all the beatings that she took from my dad and how horrible it was, and she was being raped by him, and they didn't care about the kids. They didn't care about the kids. They cared about my mom. So she got away with it. I'd show up at people's houses bruised and banged up and fat lip and bloody nose, scratched face, in a turtleneck because I was beaten and bruised, burned, I got a burn on my side that, you can't hide that sucker, right? And the thing is like, she got away with it, right? The courts allowed it, she got away with it, but whose fault was it? It was her fault. So yeah, it was my parents' fault, right? I don't blame the system, I really don't. I blame my parents for not doing the right thing. And I blame my brother, because he was 21 years old when he sexually abused me, raped me, and sexually abused me for about a year, and, screwed my body, screwed my mind, right? Twisted me, beyond belief, beyond repair, right? And then my mother, by the time I was 10, I wanted to be dead, right? Because my mother allowed this rape to happen. She allowed my brother to sexually use me for about a year, 7-8 months. And, I was just like, by the time I was 10, I was like, just kill me, I am dead. You've killed me anyway. Get it over with, that was just the way I felt, right? So I would tell her when she was beating on me, I'd just be like, kill me, I don't care. Do whatever you're going to do, because I'm dead, right? And so I carried on that way, 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, right into 13 years old, and then started getting high. Right around 12 years old. Started doing drugs and whatever I could get my hands on. And, didn't do well at school. Didn't excel, but I was just kind of, I showed up, right? I was there. I just didn't do so well. But, it's a harsh situation for people, who have grown up like this. where there's no normalcy. There's no normalcy. You know, at night your dad's trying to rape your mother, your brother's raping you, your mother's beating the shit out of you. You know, I mean, it's really something else to have to deal with, right? And so, you know, by the time I was, teenager, pretty well 14, 15 years old, you know, I was just living, you know, getting by, getting high, doing whatever I could to get high. Started working when I was 16 and continued to get high and do as many drugs as I possibly could until about the age of 21. And, you know, this whole time, my mother was still calling me all these horrible, horrific names. My mother was still beating on me till I was 18 years old, up until I hit 17 and a half. My mother was still beating on me. And, you know, I just took it, and I took it, and I took it, you know, and I loved my mom, you know, I loved my dad, and I couldn't figure out why they would be this way to their children. You know, in the meantime, one of my brothers had been murdered when I was 7 and a half, almost 8 years old, and that caused a huge problem with my other brother who raped me, because my other brother went a little bit crazy because his only protection in the home had been killed and murdered, which was his younger brother. My brother was killed was a year younger than my other brother that raped me. But he was also the protector of the family. He protected me from beatings. He protected my mother. He was always standing up for everybody, and he got killed, right? And so that had been going on. And then when I hit, I actually graduated from high school, which is a miracle. I did graduate. I actually graduated a year early. And I didn't do so well until about the 11th or 12th grade. I kind of put, you know, more effort into my school studies and stuff, and I graduated. I was the only one in the family out of 7 kids that graduated, and that's pretty cool. And then, things just kind of carried on, continued on. I was so used to being treated like garbage, and so used to dealing with what I was having to deal with at night, which was to keep my ears open for my dad trying to rape my mother. And by this time, my brothers had moved. They moved to Canada. When I was about, one of my brothers left the year after he had sexually abused me. But he had continually tried to kill himself throughout that period. And then when I was about 20 years old, my brother committed suicide, the one that sexually abused me. And I had put that so far out of my mind, except for when he phoned me he phoned the house when I was about just turning 13 years old, 12, 13. And he spoke to my mom. He said, "Oh, I've killed myself. I slit my wrists. I'm in the bathtub and I'm dying." So she put me on the phone with him and ran across the neighbor's house, because this was the days back before there was cell phones. And she ran to the neighbors to get another phone call to call for the police, right? To get him help, because she knew where he was. Up in Canada. So he was talking to me about the sexual abuse. He started telling me about how he had sexually abused me, how he liked it, how he enjoyed it. And while he's dying, I'm sitting there going, "You sick son of a," like I had put that out of my mind. I had been able to completely get away from that, and he threw it in my face. Then the next year he came to visit. So the following year, because he was so mentally ill, my mom paid for him for a trip to come home. So he came home. He was in the house with us, and threatening to sexually use me again. He says, "You know what I'll do to you. I will hurt you," And I was just like, "Oh my God, this is like a nightmare," And I'm still being beaten on by my mother and called names and a whore and a slut and all this, right? My mother used to call me these names, and she knew my brother had been sexually using me. Did she do anything about it? No, not a thing. And it's tough to come from that. It's really tough, because you sit there and you think, "Oh my God, the people that should have cared are the people that hurt me," Like these are the very people that should have cared about me, the very people that should have been there for me and protected me and loved me and taken care of me, are the very ones that tried to rip me to shreds and kill me. Like, whether they tried to physically kill me or tried to psychologically, emotionally kill me, they ripped my heart out, and then they stepped on it, and then they laughed, My mother used to laugh when she was beating me. She thought it was great. She'd throw me out of the house. She would spit in my face and slap me around. And she'd be like, "Get out, you whore," and throw me out of the house. And she would laugh. She thought it was so great, to have that power, to have that control, And I'd just go down the street going, I'm not even doing anything. As soon as I would stand up for myself and say, I'm not even doing anything, I get beat again. I didn't have a chance in that house. I didn't have a chance in that home. I was the worst treated kid out of all of them, and I was the baby. Why? Because I was a rape baby. That's why. Because my dad raped my mother, and my mother did not want me, and she was in a coma when they actually had to do a C-section to take me out because I was dying. She was dying. So I came in the world 3 months early. She was not happy about it, because then by the time she got home from the hospital, the hospital staff had gotten me in the incubator and got me up to the proper weight to go home, and she was stuck with me. This baby that she did not want, and that she was going to make sure that she make sure that I knew that. She would never touch me in a loving way. She would never let me even touch her. I couldn't even come up to hug her. She would push me away. She would slap me. She would send me flying across the room. I was not even allowed to touch her, till I got much older, right? And that's not a good way to grow up, So all of this stuff, whose fault was it, I blame the people who were directly responsible. That was my parents, and one of my siblings who decided to take it upon themselves to trash me and to trash our family, right? Just horrific. This is what people come from. This is why I do what I do, right? Because I was ready to kill myself up until, let's just say May 22nd, 2007, 5 years ago. And what changed? I was sitting there, like I said, thinking nobody's going to care if I kill myself, because that's God's honest truth. I had some friends that would have cared, but nobody, the real people I needed to care, weren't going to care. And I thought, okay, who am I doing this for? Who is this for? Is this for me, or is this like to try to make somebody care that is never going to care? And it was a reality wake-up call for me, because all my life I had been wanting people to care. I wanted my parents to love me and care about me. I wanted them to show me that they cared about me. It was never going to happen. I was never going to hear what I needed to hear from my mother. I was never going to get that love that I needed. I was never going to get that care that I needed from my dad. I was never going to, that rape and the sexual assaults, never going to ever be able to be taken away. I've been left barren because I was sexually abused as a child. No children for me. It's a horrific situation, And what caused me to change my mind was that I thought, I'm going to win this fight. By me staying alive and getting help and being well and getting away from my toxic garbage family and being healthy and having friends and having a good life, that's my victory. I win this fight. They couldn't kill me. Make sure that you get some help and do not allow your past to destroy you, right? Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon.
You've been down to